The sky above Kensington was weeping that morning, a soft drizzle falling over the palace gates as hundreds gathered in quiet disbelief. Prince William and Catherine stepped out hand in hand, their faces calm, yet their eyes spoke volumes. This wasn't just another royal appearance, it was a moment that carried the weight of history, love, and something unsaid. Each step down those stone stairs felt like turning a page, one that the world had never seen written. Behind the polished smiles and poised grace lay a truth whispered through centuries of Windsor walls. What could make the future king and queen leave the palace that defined their beginnings? The answer was waiting in Windsor. Before we uncover what truly happened behind those palace doors, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. This story dives deep into the emotional heart of the royal family. Not gossip, but truth wrapped in love, legacy, and quiet courage. Stay till the end, because what awaits in Windsor may change how you see the crown forever. The morning air over Kensington carried a strange stillness, the kind that precedes both endings and beginnings. London's skyline was wrapped in pale gray, and the drizzle that clung to the palace gates seemed almost reluctant to fall, as if the heavens themselves were holding back tears. Crowds had begun gathering before sunrise. Some came with flags, others with flowers, but most came with quiet hearts, sensing that what they were about to witness was not simply a royal departure, it was something far more intimate. Behind those ancient red brick walls, the palace was unusually quiet. The corridors that once echoed with the laughter of George, Charlotte, and Louis now felt hollow, each sound swallowed by the weight of memory. Servants moved softly, speaking in hushed tones, aware that this day marked the end of an era. Upstairs, in a familiar sunlit room overlooking the gardens, Catherine stood by the window. Her gaze rested on the lawns below, the place where her children once chased butterflies, where family photos had been taken, where ordinary joy had somehow found its place inside royal walls. She smiled faintly, though her heart ached. Change was part of royal life, she knew, but this was different. Behind her, footsteps approached. William entered quietly, dressed in a dark navy suit. His expression was calm, practiced, but in his eyes lingered a storm. For years, Kensington had been their refuge within duty, a place where they could be William and Kate, not just the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And now, even as they prepared to step into a new chapter as the Prince and Princess of Wales, the weight of what they were leaving behind pressed heavily on both. He reached for her hand, their fingers interlocking in a gesture of unspoken comfort. "Are the children ready?" he asked softly. "Yes," Catherine replied, turning to him. Charlotte packed her little crown. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that trembled at the edges.
William's lips curved, a brief flash of warmth amid the solemn air. "Of course she did," he murmured. "She's more royal than either of us ever wanted to be." For a long moment, they simply stood together, silent, breathing in the last stillness of their home. The room around them was filled with echoes. The first night they brought George home from the hospital, the laughter from Christmas mornings, the late-night talks about duty, about family, about what the future might demand. Outside, the hum of the waiting crowd began to swell. Reporters lined the perimeter, cameras trained on the palace doors. Yet for all the noise outside, within those walls time seemed to pause. "Do you ever think," Catherine whispered, "that perhaps the crown asked for too much?" William's jaw tightened slightly. "Every day," he said. "But perhaps that's why we keep going, not because it's easy, but because we still believe in what it could mean." A knock at the door broke the quiet. A royal aide entered respectfully. "Your Royal Highnesses, it's time." Kate took one last look around. Her eyes rested on the mantel, where framed photographs stood. Family holidays, a picture of her and William laughing at the polo, another of their wedding day. She reached out and touched one frame gently, then turned to William. "Let's go," she said. They descended the grand staircase slowly, hand in hand. The marble steps gleamed beneath their feet, every echo a heartbeat. Palace staff lined the corridor. Some curtsied, others bowed, but all watched in silence, emotion flickering across faces that had served them for over a decade. At the bottom of the stairs, the great double doors loomed, the very doors they had stepped through countless times to greet the public, to celebrate, to mourn, to live their royal story. Today, those doors seemed heavier than ever. The air outside greeted them like a sigh. A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd as a couple emerged, their figures framed by the historic facade of Kensington Palace. Catherine wore a simple dove-grey coat, elegant yet understated, while William's expression bore the quiet gravity of a man who carried not just his own heart, but the weight of generations. For a moment, no one spoke. Cameras clicked softly, but even the press seemed to sense that this was not a moment for spectacle. It was one for reverence. Then, as the couple began their descent down the stone steps, a woman in the crowd started to cry. Others followed, silent tears, the kind born not of sorrow, but of shared humanity. William gave a faint nod toward the crowd, his eyes scanning familiar faces, people who had followed their journey since that wedding day in 2011. Beside him, Catherine squeezed his hand. Each step they took seemed to echo a promise, that even as they left this palace behind, they would not leave the people behind. When they reached the car, Catherine paused. She turned back toward the palace, her gaze tracing every brick, every window that had witnessed their life unfold. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Goodbye," she said. William placed a hand on her back, guiding her gently forward. "We'll carry it with us," he murmured. "Always." As the car doors closed, the drizzle turned to steady rain. The wipers brushed away the water as the vehicle rolled slowly through the palace gates. Outside, the crowd waved, not out of ceremony, but affection. There were no grand trumpets, no rehearsed smiles, just a quiet sound of people saying farewell to a part of royal history that had felt, somehow, like their own. Through the window, William watched the red bricks of Kensington fade into the distance. Ahead, Windsor waited, its towers rising through the mist like sentinels of both legacy and secrecy. He exhaled deeply, his hand finding Catherine's once more. "Whatever truth lies ahead," he said quietly, "we'll face it together." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering but sure. "Together," she echoed. The rain softened, turning the city's gray into silver. Somewhere behind them, the walls of Kensington stood silent, not abandoned, but honored. And somewhere ahead, beyond the long road to Windsor, destiny stayed, whispering the promise of a hidden truth about to be revealed. The car ride from Kensington to Windsor was quiet, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Outside, raindrops streaked the windows, blurring the view of London as it slipped away. Familiar streets, old landmarks, places that had framed the life they once knew. Inside, the hum of the engine seemed almost rhythmic, a heartbeat carrying them towards something unseen. Catherine sat beside William, her hands folded on her lap, gaze distant. Her reflection in the window looked calm, but her mind was racing. For weeks, whispers had grown louder within royal circles, subtle questions about their move, private meetings behind closed doors, and the sudden urgency to reposition their family life around Windsor. The official statement spoke of privacy and proximity to the children's new school, but both William and Kate knew there was more beneath the surface. William broke the silence first. "Do you ever think," he began quietly, "that duty sometimes feels like a stranger in your own home?" Kate turned to him. "Always," she said softly. "But lately, it feels like duty is watching us closer than ever." The comment lingered, heavy with meaning. The us she spoke of wasn't just about them as a couple. It was about the institution itself. The monarchy had always been both a family and a system. And systems, no matter how noble, had a way of guarding their truths fiercely. At Windsor, the air felt different, older, weightier. The car passed through the great gates, guards standing at perfect attention, their expressions unreadable. The castle rose in the mist like a memory, magnificent, yet somehow foreboding. For centuries, it had been the fortress of kings and queens, the keeper of secrets too delicate for history books. As they entered the courtyard, Catherine felt a shiver. It wasn't from the cold. Something about Windsor carried an energy, as if the very stones were alive with echoes of the past. Inside, the transition was immediate. Footmen bowed, officials greeted them with formal smiles, and within minutes, the machinery of royal life began to hum again. Meetings scheduled, press briefings prepared, every step mapped out to precision. Yet beneath the polite efficiency, Both William and Catherine sensed unease, a subtle undercurrent of something unsaid. Later that evening, when the children had gone to bed, they found themselves alone in one of the smaller sitting rooms overlooking the gardens. The flicker of the fireplace cast golden light across their faces. Catherine held a cup of tea she'd forgotten to sip. "Do you remember," she asked quietly, "what your grandmother used to say about Windsor?" William nodded, smiling faintly. "She said Windsor is where truth sleeps, until it decides to wake." He leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. She never explained what that meant. "Maybe we're about to find out," Catherine said. The next morning, the palace corridors were alive with movement. Advisors came and went. Paperwork shuffled. Telephones rang. William spent much of the day in briefings, meetings about charity work, education programs, and the transition of certain offices from London to Windsor. Yet between the formalities, he noticed the glances. Small, cautious looks between senior aides. Something was moving behind the scenes. By afternoon, his private secretary, Sir Alistair, approached him. "Your Royal Highness," he said, lowering his voice, "there's a matter regarding archival access. It appears your clearance for certain Windsor records has been temporarily restricted." William frowned. "Restricted? On whose authority?" "I'm not entirely certain, Sir," Alistair replied carefully, "but the order came from the household office itself. I thought you should know." William's jaw tightened. The archives at Windsor held centuries of royal history, documents, correspondences, and personal letters from past monarchs. As future king, his access was supposed to be unrestricted. The idea that something had been deliberately closed off struck him like a cold wind. "Thank you, Alistair," he said finally. "That'll be all." When the door closed, William stared out the window at the distant towers. He had long known that the monarchy's history was layered, light and shadow intertwined. But the timing of this restriction, coinciding with their move, felt deliberate. "That night," he told Catherine. She listened carefully, her brow furrowing. "So," she said slowly, "they've moved us here, closer to Windsor, yet they don't want you seeing what's inside." "Exactly," William said. "It doesn't add up." Later that evening, while walking through the castle's quieter halls, Catherine noticed something, a portrait partially draped with cloth near one of the older galleries. The plaque beneath it had been removed, though the painting's edges showed the faint outline of a familiar face. She stopped, heart beating faster. A curator passing by noticed her interest. "Ah, that one," he said, almost nervously. "That portrait's been taken off public view for restoration." Catherine nodded politely, but the explanation didn't sit right. The brushstroke she glimpsed, the figure in royal uniform, the background of Windsor itself, suggested a story the palace might prefer forgotten. When she told William about it later, his reaction was quiet but firm. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll see what else is hidden here." Over the next few days, the atmosphere inside Windsor grew thicker, a mix of respect and tension. Courtiers whispered in corridors, and old family rumors began resurfacing in the press. Talk of letters exchanged between late royals, of private family decisions that had shaped the crown's future. At breakfast one morning, Catherine placed a folded newspaper on the table. The headline read, "Windsor Secrets, What Prompted the Wales Move." William sighed, folding it away. "They always think they know the truth," he said. "But this time, even I'm not sure we do." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "Then maybe," she said softly, "it's time we find out." The look they shared said more than words could. This wasn't just about a home. It was about legacy and what they were truly inheriting. Duty had brought them here, but doubt was beginning to open doors neither had dared approach before. Outside, the bells of Windsor chimed, solemn and deep. Somewhere in the castle's lower halls, a forgotten corridor led toward the royal archives, sealed, silent, waiting. And within those walls, a truth older than both of them rested, patient as time itself. As the chimes faded, William rose from his seat and looked toward the window, where the early sunlight broke through clouds. "Tomorrow," he murmured, "we begin." Catherine nodded. "Whatever's been hidden," she said, "it's time it saw the light." And with that, Windsor's long-guarded silence began to tremble. The morning sun slipped through Windsor's high windows, painting streaks of gold across the ancient stone. The castle seemed alive, quiet, regal, yet humming with the breath of history. It was here, within these very walls, that kings had made their promises and kept their secrets. And now, it was where William and Catherine would seek their answers. After breakfast, they walked through the lower corridors, guided by a discreet archivist named Mrs. Harcourt, a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and formal. "These halls," she said softly, "go back nearly 1,000 years. Every monarch left something behind, a letter, a thought, a regret." Catherine exchanged a glance with William. "And some of those regrets," she said gently, "were buried, weren't they?" Mrs. Harcourt's lips pressed into a thin smile. "Not everything is meant for daylight, Your Royal Highness." Her tone was respectful, but her words hung in the air like a warning. They descended a narrow staircase that opened into the private royal archives, a series of secure rooms sealed by thick wooden doors. Mrs. Harcourt unlocked one, the key turning with a deep, ancient click. The scent of old parchment and polished oak filled the air. "This section," she said, gesturing toward the dimly lit shelves, "contains correspondence from the late Queen's early reign, and some private letters relating to the transition of power during turbulent years." William nodded. "And my clearance has been limited," he said carefully, watching her reaction. Mrs. Harcourt hesitated for the briefest moment. "That order didn't come from me," she said. "But if there is something you seek, Your Royal Highness, I suggest you look under what was never officially catalogued." Her gaze lingered meaningfully. Then she bowed and withdrew, leaving them alone among centuries of silence. The room was cold and still. Dust motes floated through the sunbeams like ghosts of the past. William ran his fingers along the spines of thick, leather-bound ledgers. Catherine watched him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you really think," she asked quietly, "there's something here someone doesn't want you to see?" He turned to her. "After everything we've been through, yes." They searched for hours. The quiet was broken only by the rustle of paper and the ticking of a distant clock. Rows upon rows of documents lay before them, histories of state, letters from monarchs, treaties, private correspondences. Then, near the bottom of an unmarked shelf, Catherine noticed something odd, a narrow wooden box, small and unassuming, tucked behind a stack of ledgers. "What's this?" she murmured. William knelt beside her and carefully pulled it free. The lid bore an engraved crest, the Windsor emblem, but older, faded, slightly different from the current royal seal. He brushed the dust away, revealing a faint inscription, "For the eyes of the heir, when the time is right." Their eyes met. No words were needed. He opened it. Inside lay a bundle of letters bound with a dark blue ribbon. The parchment was yellowed, but the ink still sharp. William carefully unfolded the first page. The handwriting was elegant, unmistakable, his grandmother's. "My dear grandson, if you are reading this, then the time has come for truth, not the one history records, but the one the crown remembers." Catherine drew a quiet breath as William read aloud. The letter spoke of a hidden decision made decades ago, one that reshaped the future of the monarchy. It spoke of a lost branch of the royal bloodline, one concealed from public record to protect the crown's image during a time of crisis. Windsor, the letter continued, was not merely chosen as a royal residence. It was chosen as a keeper of truth. There are things that were too dangerous to reveal, not for shame, but for preservation. But every truth finds its moment. When it does, I trust you will do what is right, not what is easy. William fell silent. His eyes lingered on the final line, written in her unmistakable hand. "Love will carry the crown farther than blood ever could." Catherine reached out, touching his arm gently. "She left this for you," she said softly, "for this moment." He stared at the letter for a long while. A hidden air, a concealed truth. His voice trailed off. "How much of our history is real, then?" "Maybe," Catherine whispered. "That's a question every generation has to answer." They found several more letters, some written by royal advisers, others by Queen Elizabeth herself. Together, they painted a picture of quiet sacrifice, a child born of royal blood but raised outside palace walls, deliberately kept from the line of succession to prevent scandal. Records indicated that this child had grown up unaware of their birthright, their descendants still living, ordinary citizens, bound unknowingly to the royal line. Catherine's voice trembled slightly. So there's family out there, people who share your blood, but not your name. William nodded slowly, and the institution buried it. He stood, pacing the room, emotion rising beneath his calm exterior. All this time, we've been told the monarchy was about duty, legacy, honor, but maybe it's been about silence. Catherine rose and placed a hand on his chest. Then maybe we change that, she said. Maybe we make it about truth. He looked into her eyes that held both compassion and strength. And if the world isn't ready, then we lead it there, she said simply. That night, as the castle slept, William returned alone to the archives. He read through every letter again, tracing the past in ink and sorrow. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Love will carry the crown farther than blood ever could. He thought of his mother, Diana, the way she'd fought to humanize a monarchy, to bridge the distance between the palace and the people. Perhaps this was her unspoken legacy living on, not rebellion, but truth. As he left the archives, he paused at the entrance hall, gazing up at the ancient portraits that lined the walls. Kings and queens looked down in regal silence, their eyes painted with centuries of power. For the first time, William saw not just their crowns, but their burdens. Maybe it's time, he whispered, that we let the people see who we really are. When he returned to their chambers, Catherine was waiting by the window, the lights of Windsor flickering in the distance. He handed her one of the letters. She read it quietly, then looked up at him. So what now? She asked. William's answer was quiet, steady, but filled with resolve. Now, he said, we tell the truth. No more hiding, not even behind the crown. Catherine smiled faintly. Then Windsor won't be just our new home, she said. It'll be where the truth finally breathes again. Outside, the castle clock struck midnight, 12 solemn chimes that seemed to awaken the very stones of Windsor. And with each toll, the weight of centuries began to shift, as if the past itself was ready to step into the light. Dawn broke gently over Windsor, light spilling through the gray clouds like hope returning after a long night. The castle grounds were hushed, yet beneath that calm lay an electricity, the quiet before truth reshaped history. Prince William stood by the window of his study, a letter clutched in his hand. It was the last of his grandmother's, short, deliberate, and final. When love outweighs fear, tell the world who we are. He had read those words again and again through the night, feeling their weight settle into his bones. This was no longer just about a hidden heir or a buried family secret. It was about what kind of crown the next generation would carry, one rooted not only in duty, but in honesty. Behind him, Catherine entered softly, wrapped in a pale cream shawl. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You didn't sleep? She said gently. He smiled faintly. No, but I think, for the first time, I understand. Understand what? That the monarchy can't survive on silence anymore. Catherine nodded. Then let's be the ones to change it. That afternoon, an extraordinary announcement was prepared, one that would ripple through royal circles, across the British Isles, and around the world. The press had gathered in Windsor's main courtyard, unsure of what to expect. The cameras clicked as the couple stepped out, not with grandeur, but with grace. William wore his military suit, Catherine a simple navy dress. Their expressions were calm, composed, but the world could sense it. Something was different. When William spoke, his voice carried the firmness of his father and the warmth of his mother. For generations, he began, the crown has stood as a symbol of duty, honor, and continuity. But no symbol can endure without truth. Today, Catherine and I wish to share something long kept within these walls, not as scandal, but as family history. The crowd leaned in, the air taut with anticipation. Records from the royal archives have revealed that during my grandmother's early reign, a member of our family was born outside the public eye. Their lineage was kept private for reasons of stability during difficult times. This truth, though buried, remains part of who we are and of who I am. A murmur rippled through the press. Flashbulbs lit the courtyard like lightning. But William's tone remained steady. We have reached a moment in history where love, Truth and unity must outweigh fear. To those who share this lineage, wherever you are, know that you are not forgotten. The crown remembers you, and so do I. He paused, glancing toward Catherine. She met his gaze with quiet strength. My grandmother once wrote that love will carry the crown farther than blood ever could, William continued. Today, I believe that more than ever. The monarchy is not a relic of secrecy. It is a living promise, one built not just on heritage, but on humanity. When he finished, there was silence, the kind that feels sacred. Then applause rose slowly, spreading like a wave through the courtyard. It wasn't the sound of spectacle. It was a sound of understanding. Catherine stepped forward then, adding softly, As a mother, I want our children to inherit a world where truth is not hidden, but honored. The past belongs to all of us, and together we'll build a future that does too. Her words lingered in the air, gentle yet profound. That evening, after the press had cleared and Windsor returned to its quiet rhythm, the couple sat together on a small stone bench overlooking the gardens. The air smelled of rain and roses. The castle light shimmered in the distance. Catherine leaned her head against William's shoulder. Do you think the world will forgive the silence? She asked. He smiled faintly. Maybe, or maybe they'll simply see that we're human after all. She looked up at him. That's all you ever wanted, isn't it? For the crown to feel human. He nodded. And for our children to grow up knowing that truth is never a threat, it's a foundation. For a long time, they sat in silence, watching the stars pierce through clouds. Somewhere in the distance, the bells of St. George's Chapel began to toll, deep and solemn. But this time, their sound felt less like duty and more like release. Inside the palace, the letters were sealed again, not hidden, but preserved. A record of courage, of change, of love that dared to tell the truth. Days later, newspapers across the world carried the headline, Prince William reveals hidden chapter of royal family. Truth is a crown's strength art. Some praised their honesty, others debated the implications, but most simply felt moved. Because for the first time in modern memory, the monarchy had chosen transparency over tradition, compassion over control. In classrooms, children spoke about courage. In homes, families talked about forgiveness. And across the kingdom, people began to see not just a prince and princess, but a husband and wife who had chosen love in its purest, most human form. 1 week later, William and Catherine returned briefly to London. Their car slowed outside Kensington Palace, the place they had once called home. The red brick facade glowed in the afternoon sun. Catherine rolled down her window, smiling softly. It feels lighter now, she whispered. William nodded. Because we left truth behind, not sorrow. They sat there for a moment, letting the past rest peacefully where it belonged. Then the car moved on toward Windsor, toward a future rewritten not by power, but by purpose. And as the palace faded into the distance, the sky broke open with light, as though the heavens themselves had finally exhaled. If this story touched your heart, remember, truth, like love, is timeless. Disney subscribe for more royal stories that reveal the heart behind the crown. Click like, share, and join our journey, because every story of love and legacy deserves to be told.